Thank you for joining ChefConf Day 3. Woo! I'm Kaya Tolliver, developer advocate here at Progress for Chef. And I am joined here with my colleagues, Dan, Benny, and John. And I will let each of them introduce themselves. Dan, you start.
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah. So I'm a DevRel at Chef Progress Software. I have been here for I think it might be 6 months now. But I've been in the chef community for I think it's been
Ever.
6 months.
Ever.
Yeah,
I think
and
that's
I
been-
think and how long? I'm not going to check how long I've been in the chef community for because it's going to scare the hell out of me.
I think it's
But
like
I've been
6
around
years.
for a while. Is it 6 years? Oh, yeah.
I think so. I think I was looking it up the other day.
That was scary.
Wow.
That was scary. I wouldn't call myself legit. I've just been faking it the entire time. But I mostly do infra stuff. And Kaya is you're mostly doing the habitat stuff, aren't you? So
Yes. Yep.
and
And
we
I'm brand
together are
spanking new.
filling the inspec gap, which is hopefully when our third person gets hired at some point soon, which I am excited by. I will have a third person on the team. But at the minute, we're doing some inspec stuff as well, which is pretty cool. And on that note, I'll just hand over to my manager, Betty.
Yeah. So I'm Benny. I run the DevRel team and manage community at at Progress for Chef, I guess. Is that how we're gonna say that? That works. I like that.
Yep.
I have been part of Chef since November of 2019 and am loving every part of it. Like so far, it's a great community and it's a great great ecosystem. I really love DevOps. I also love that Dan's just eating cake. Like,
Yep.
way to be. Way to be.
It's 3 p.m. right now. It's tea and cake time.
It's tea and cake time. I mean, I'm still drinking my
buddy.
coffee, so that's probably fine. All right, that's me. John, you're up.
Hi, I'm John Tinello. I'm a technical marketing manager here at Chef. I've been here about 6 months, but like Benny, I love all things DevOps, and I live in a unique spot between the marketing, DevRel, and sales engineers, architects, and the engineers. So I get to see the latest and greatest, and get to I don't want to say play, but I get to play with all the cool new stuff, which is great. And I write about it and make videos about it. So you may have seen some of my stuff in the blog posts and elsewhere. So I'm sort of like a DevRel wannabe in a way, because I'm often creating stuff that I'm like, what's the kind of issue that someone out there is having that's real? Let me explain that in a context that makes sense and makes them successful every time. When I release something, it's like, this works and it's gonna work and continue to work. So
yeah.
And I've been told by Benny that I'm a chatty Cathy, so I'm going to stop.
No.
You are in good company.
This is Tucker.
Oh, your cat. Hi, Tucker. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Today is a very special day. Why is it a very special day? Not only is it the final day of ChefConf, that's kind of sad, but it's also our hackathon launch day. Woo!
Yay!
Benny,
Yeah.
can you give our viewers a bit of a background and tell them why this is so important for us?
Yeah. So, the idea here. So, obviously, I said I joined in November of 2019. So I've never actually attended an in-person ChefConf. But historically, ChefConf ended, the last day was a hack day. And what that meant, and Dan can actually probably speak to what it actually felt like because he's been to some, but the idea there was like, you learn all this stuff, you build all this energy, you make all these new connections, and then you solve problems. You solve like real problems on day 3. You get together and like work on the things that you're excited about, like some of it was adding to the product, some of it was fixing things that you had that were busted, and some of it was, it was just all building to this a sharing and exchanging of knowledge and a bonding, because the chef community is friggin' amazing. And this is now our second year in a row that we're not together, and we can't do that. And it's it's really missing from the conference. So instead, we wanted to do something that was kind of similar. Obviously, a hack day and a hackathon are not the same, but the idea here is that we get to continue on the trend of build all of this energy with ChefConf and then put it to use. So solve real world problems in a way that helps the world. This automate for good name is the idea, is really very much, let's fix things that are a problem for people, or let's build things that solve problems that really do improve lives everywhere, and specifically in the DevOps world. So we're doing that. We're also there's this like prevalent idea that is said by a bunch of people that like get excited about new and shiny toys, that Chef is somehow not being used. And we know that's not true, right? We know that, especially things like the inspect story from SAP that we just heard at the conference, like we know that there's still new ways that the Chef products are being used, and like exciting things that are being done. So we want to see some of that. We want to share those stories as well, and bring new people into the Chef ecosystem. We're using DevPost for this because the reach there is far greater than we would have on our own, and there's a bunch of people already there. So we get to interact with new people, bring new people into our world, and obviously the new and improved stuff that's going to show up is exciting for everybody. Like we'll be able to share. The exchange of ideas is really what I want to see. That's going to be my most exciting thing out of this.
I'm glad you mentioned SAP, Benny, because being used, millions of instances, it's. I just read something recently about, that the human mind can't really handle the abstraction of what those millions is, but millions of systems, and they have tens of thousands of accounts. Like it's just a massive thing. And, and it's one of those presentations, SAP couldn't exist without something like Chef, right? Like and they're, what did he say? They're doubling their capacity. They're planning to double every year.
He said even in this year, they're going to exceed that.
Right.
That's
and when you think about, like, how would you do that? Like, how big would your team have to be?
Right? You can't onboard people fast enough.
Right.
Well, it depends. If like all the resources are the same, then like you can scale mad, right?
Yeah, but they're not, because all the waivers and stuff, and like.
Yeah, and every customer has different things across different industries. I used to work in higher ed. There were quite a few regulations that were unlike anything else in industry, right? In SAP, and there are quite a few of our customers and soon-to-be customers, I think, that deal with that kind of stuff. There isn't just one flavor of anything, and nor should there be, right? And that's one of the cool things too, that you go, we're a Windows shop because we have to be, and we really know it. Like, well, you can take advantage of a whole bunch of technologies, and SAP, is a high watermark, but there are many like that. And that presentation this morning, Kaya, with the setting up the development environment with Chef,
right?
Really, like, oh yeah, I've kind of done stuff like that too. Like I push a button, here's my lab, and it's awesome.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, that one really stood out to me because I come from a development background. I did .NET development for about 10 years prior to joining Chef and, getting into the DevRel world. So I have had plenty of experience with setting up developer environments, and oh my goodness, it's a beast. It can be
Yeah.
a beast. And when Mindy told me about how they were, using Chef to reduce that time from like possibly days to hours. Like you can go on your lunch break and your development environment is back up, is up, and that's when you start. That's when you mess something up, and then you have to like blow everything away um and spin it up again, and then hold the phone, because back in the day you had to lose everything. You lost all your files when you had to when you had to set up your dev environment again. And now you don't have to do that. Now you can keep all of your stuff. And that just really blew my mind. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if you could tell in the video, but that really blew my mind.
Yep.
Oh, but like the number of places I've been to, and then
Mm.
like, oh yeah, so we're just going to onboard this new contractor. Okay, cool. That's something a great idea. So how long will that take? Probably about 2 weeks.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you're like, sorry, what? And you're paying them
Right.
how much a day? And then you
Right.
haven't bothered to like, if you can like onboard people really quickly and get a dev environment like, up, you can save literally thousands of pounds a week of like lost work, and it's mad.
Well, and,
Yeah,
and you
it
can
really
start
is.
generating revenue faster, right? You can't start
Yeah.
billing
Yeah.
until it's up and running.
Exactly. So cool. So I guess let's get into the meat and potatoes of our hackathon.
Yeah.
Share my screen. I got some slides. Benny made them pretty
Yeah.
for me. Thanks, Benny.
You're welcome.
Okay, so
I gotta be good for something, right?
you're good for a lot. Like you put
Yeah, I was gonna say.
ChefConf on your back, girl. So
I mean, I herded some cats.
cool. So automate for good. I'm not even sure if we even talked about like the name, like, or what we were doing. Like, so
A little bit.
basically, yeah, okay.
But go for it.
So automate for good is what our hackathon is called, and there's a reason behind that. The reason is we want you to use Chef products to build something to improve the lives of the DevOps world. We'll get deeper into like some ideas a little bit later. But let's talk about how to register. Okay. Actually, I'm gonna need to share a different screen because I'm gonna go into the meat and potatoes. Nobody's gonna have any questions after this as far as how to get registered. So let me share my other screen here.
Go, computer, go.
Woo! Oh, okay.
There we go.
Okay, cool. So we're gonna go to devpost.com. And you are going to type in automate for good. Search hackathons. And it's right here, featured navigate to. And on the first page, you're going to find a button called Join Hackathon and click that. And you're going to say whether you have teammates, if you're looking for them, or if you're working solo. Kind of just fill out this little form here and just click the button here to register. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And now we're going into the abyss of shared screens. So let me go back to my slides.
That was amazing.
Right? Okay. So what are we building? We're building things. We're going to build a system of automation that improve the lives of anyone in the DevOps world using at least one piece of Chef software suite. You can use Infra, Inspect, Habitat, or Chef Automate. There's going to be judges like any hackathon. And here's what we're going to use to judge based off of. We're going to have like basic general DevOps principles. So are you following DevOps best practices? and the general philosophy. We're going to obviously talk about how, or also going to judge on how our chef software is being used. How extensively are you using the products? Is it a large part? Are you like doing automation or automating builds? Are you using Habitat to what were we talking about? Using Habitat to gosh, Dan, help me out here.
I'll
Dan was
jump
just
in.
talking about an idea.
Yeah.
So I use GitHub Actions quite a lot.
GitHub Actions. That was what it was. GitHub Actions.
So GitHub Actions uses TypeScript or Docker to create the images, and you can run those images on pipelines. What happens if you built a really small pipeline image that you could just pull from Docker Hub and just use those instead? They'll be really small, they'll be really quick, and hopefully that would help a bunch of people. So let's say you were going to use, I don't know, like let's say curl. And all you need to do is curl some images down. You could build that image with Habitat. It would be super, super tiny and run real quick. And that would mean that everyone's pipeline would start up much quicker, run much quicker, and get some feedback even quicker. So you'd be saving hundreds of hours of dev time there, which is always helpful. It kind of goes back to the setup example, like if you can get people running quicker.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. So like something like that would be great. A great implementation of our software. And also that idea also lends to the rest of our judging criteria too. So business or use case viability, like how can people use it? How viable is it in the real world? And the quality of the idea. Like we're catering to newbies here as well. So, I mean, we want you to, it's a safe space to be creative, but also make sure that it's something that you think that the DevOps community can use, and it's overall a good idea. Next, how do you submit, or what to submit? Sorry. So you're gonna make sure that you give a written explanation and a video explanation. So through your solution, right? You're going to tell us how you built it, what DevOps practices you were using. Video should be about 3 minutes. You should definitely do a demo. Always do a demo. And use the following hashtags: hashtag Chef Hackathon and hashtag Automate for Good. You're going to make sure that you explain how your solution meets the Automate for Good goal. So how you're helping the DevOps community out. Or even if you're doing something for, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, if we're doing something, just in general for good, and not necessarily for DevOps good, but just for good in general.
For sure, yeah. Like it just needs to include like as long as you're following good like best practices around DevOps and around how to use our software and like that kind of stuff. As long as you're doing something in that space, it doesn't have to be specifically aimed at making automation easier in the DevOps world. It could be anywhere.
Cool. Good. You're also going to give us a GitHub link because we're going to need to play with it. We're going to need to see it work. That's very, very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm super excited about that bit personally because I want to try out all the little new toys and see how they run. If they don't work, we can always help with that as well, going through, which we'll come to in a second. So that'll be pretty sweet.
Absolutely. Yep. And we're going to need a README with details for deployment and operation. I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
And with that README, assume I'm stupid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You're not. It's not that you're stupid. Assume that you need like very base level instructions. As somebody who is one of the judges this year, I really want to stress I'm going to walk in, or our judges are all walking in with very different levels of understanding of the technology that we're going to be doing, or that that you're going to be using, whether it's whether it's Jenkins, whether it's Chef, whether it's Terraform, like whatever you're walking in, we're going to have, as the judges are, some are executive level folks that are like started in tech, some are executive level folks that started not in tech, some of them are like developers themselves, so they'll get it very easily. But we're all going to walk in with very different understandings of what you're doing, so make sure that you are verbose. You're far less likely to hit a point where you're saying too much. I promise you, it's better to go with more words than less.
Yeah.
Yep. And steps, like step 1, step 2, step 3 always works. Let's go to the next slide. So when to submit. Got us a nice little timeline. Okay. So we're opening up for submission starting today. And the deadline for submissions is October 25th. So everything needs to be in by October 25th.
Is that 6 weeks from now? Is that?
That's 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That's a good amount of time. It's very fair for a hackathon. It's actually a lot of time for a hackathon. So, but we're assuming that we're getting a lot of new people that are going to be learning Chef. So that's why we decided to go with the 6 weeks to give you more than enough time to kind of get a grip on what Chef is and how, what you've learned here in ChefConf, and utilize some of our resources that are on the DevPost site to just kind of get your feet wet and then go and build great stuff.
Yeah, and it might take time to find a team or anything like that. We wanted to make sure that folks had plenty of time. We weren't like making it too short. You know what I mean?
For sure. I think that was a great idea to go with the longer time frame.
Yeah.
Judging is going to be about a week. What was that? A week or two? To 20th to the 10th.
Yeah.
And so that's when, our judges, I think, so Benny, you're a judge. Dan, you're also a judge, right?
Yeah, or a mentor. I can't remember what I said. But yes, whatever you say.
Yep, I think you're a judge. Bro. But so yep, we're gonna get all our judges together and they're gonna go through your submissions between the 28th and November 10th. And November 11th through the 16th, our winners will be announced. So definitely by the 16th, you'll know whether you won and what place you took. So
it's true.
Where can you find help? All right. So there's plenty of resources for help. We have the Hackathon resources page on DevPost, which there's a link there, but it's a lot of slashes. So I understand. Let's see if I'll put it in the chat here. I wonder if it'll go out to everybody.
Yeah, it should go to everybody. In case anyone's wondering what we're using to stream, we're using Restream, and it's the best thing ever.
It's the best. Okay. But before, when I'm done with this, I'll put these links out on the chat.
I'll do it while you're talking.
Oh, sweet. Thanks, Dan. Also, our community Slack. If you're not a part of community Slack, please join community Slack. That's where everything goes down. Like all of the questions get answered. We have a hackathon room specifically for this hackathon. You'll be able to talk to mentors. You'll be able to meet potential teammates, all of that jazz. Ask general questions. That's where you'll find all of that information. Community Slack. Discourse. We also have forums and discourse, discourse.chef.io. That one's pretty simple. Our docs, also a really good breadth and depth knowledge in our docs. docs.chef.io. And we're also hosting office hours on Tuesdays from now until the deadline on October 25th. So we'll have about 6 office hours. Our first one starts next week, next Tuesday. That's basically answering all of your hackathon questions. Is that ask me anything? And oh, here we go. Here goes our thanks, Vinny, for putting that up. So yep,
You're
Tuesday,
welcome.
September 14th. We've got your ask me anything. The next Tuesday, we're gonna bring in all the mentors for the participants. Mentors will also be available in the community Slack hashtag hackathon room. Then we're gonna start doing some getting started with various products for the next 3 Tuesdays. And finally, we will sum it up with some debugging support. So if you need help with debugging, hop on and we'll help where we can and help get you in the right direction. And let's talk about
Come on. Yeah, it's the best bit.
Let's talk about the prizes. This is the best part, you guys. This is the best part. Like, we did not half step at all with these prizes. First place, I mean, t-shirts for the team, stickers. What's a Badger badge? Can we talk about that?
Yeah, so Badger is a badge site. So we do them for Learn Chef. So if you complete Learn Chef courses, you get a Badger badge, which is pretty sweet. We're doing this for the prices, which is pretty good. I'll bring the Badger site up in a second.
Okay,
Perfect.
cool. And you guys, it's $15,000. $15,000 for first place. So that's pretty freaking sweet. That's kind of above and beyond. I think, we really outdid ourselves. Same non-monetary prizes for second and third, but second is 10,000, which is still nothing to sneeze at, and third is 5. Like, you win either way. Like, first, second, and third, you're going shopping or doing something nice for yourself. Like, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it, people. So join.
Treat yourself.
Treat yourself. Exactly.
All right, so I'm excited about the next page. The middle one.
Yeah.
Because those things are hard to get hold of still.
Yeah. So wait, can we talk about, okay, so these best implementation, most promising ideas, and the submitter prizes,
Mhm.
these are like for people who didn't win first, second, and third place?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so these are like honorable mentions.
Essentially, yeah. Like we know that there are going to be projects that get submitted that we're like, oh, it's really good, but like it's not
Right.
quite there, right? It's not quite what it needs to be. So we'll pick a couple that we have to, like, that we want to award. We want to reward the people that submitted, but
Yeah.
we're not stuck.
Right.
Not quite there.
Exactly. Now, these prizes are pretty awesome as well. Like, I've had pros for best implementation. A PS5. Yeah, you can't even find those.
Yeah.
For most promising idea. And the submitter one still gets some really good swag. So, I mean, that's
anybody who submits, we want them to get something, right?
Yeah. Everybody who submits. So this is one for everybody who submits gets swag. Which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So what are next steps? Okay, first, you got to register. Like, you can't submit without registration. Okay. Join the Chef community Slack. If you are not already on it, like, what are you doing?
What are you doing with your life?
Right. Like, join a team if you want. Like, you can go solo. There's no real. It's only about your preferences. We don't mind either way. And then get learning and get building and start putting some stuff together so you can win some great prizes and possibly some moolah, cheddar, bacon.
So much. It's so much money, you guys.
It's so much money, right? I wish I could join. I really wish I could join.
I was talking to Matt about this last night. Like, getting Progress to agree to financially back a hackathon was really not hard. Like, they were in. They really want to support community involvement and community engagement. And I know that, like, I'm gonna get off on a tangent here, but like, it was very nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's awesome. I think it's awesome. I mean, just trying to get Chef into the hands of new people, right? Like, and money motivates. So we gotta bring it. You gotta bring it. So if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And while we wait for questions, I'm going to pass it off to John. John's going to give us a little bit of like high level getting started with chef products, like education.
Yeah.
Right?
Edumacation.
Edumacation.
I can't remember. Is that a Simpsons thing?
Is it a Simpsons thing? I don't know.
It's not a real hackathon without at least one reference to the Simpsons,
Correct, yes.
So thanks, Kaya. We were talking before the start of the hackathon. We recognize that not everybody is super familiar with the chef ecosystem. And I've done some stuff recently that I thought I'd share. And it's sort of a high level overview, but also I'll go down in the weeds a little bit, so it'll be practical. And what I want to do, I'm going to share a screen here. This will be exciting. It's a workstation desktop. I'm going to talk about. Oh, cool. Restreams, awesome, as Dan said. The ecosystem in what we're talking about today, is the chef infra components, the chef compliance components, the chef app delivery components. But what does that really mean? And for everyday users, it really starts with Workstation. And I have a Mac, I have Windows and Linux machines that I use, but I always like to spin up Workstation in a VM. And I have an AMI and an Amazon Cloud that I can use for this purpose, which has access to the world. And I have one in my own lab. And I set this thing up not only to run Chef Workstation, which is the set of tools for interacting with all the Chef components, but it has some other stuff too. Obviously, I have a browser, and I have VS Code on here. I have Workstation installed, and I also have Docker running on this workstation, which you'll say, well, that's pretty typical. Why do we need that? Test Kitchen has some great built-in capabilities to use Docker, so we can go through all the testing of cookbooks and basically anything that you're looking to do within that environment. But what I want to show also is Chef Automate dashboard, because the ecosystem consists of Chef Automate and the infra server, which the infra server is the place that stores your cookbooks, your recipes, your policy files, basically everything that you're working on. And within your ecosystem, all your nodes and even external connectors like Servicenow AWS, Azure, GCP. Tools like Jenkins can integrate with it, but that's sort of the key component of running all your content. There's Workstation, which we'll be talking about and configuring that. But I thought what I would do is show a little bit of some of the initial basic setups, because when you have infra server running and you have Workstation, they need to communicate with each other. And there's a couple of things to do to make that happen. It's pretty straightforward. I actually scripted this for the deployment of Chef Automate and infra server. And there are some pretty good docs available. And I think we're going to try to share my everything you need to know to get started with Chef document in the community channel, hopefully here in a few minutes. But the Chef infra server and Workstation communicate seamlessly once you have that set up. And what that enables you to do is use it as your key resource. And there's a couple other things that you can do when setting attributes so that you can see in real time the activity when you're bootstrapping nodes and doing things like that. This is my lab, and you can see I have a Debian, I have an OpenSUSE box, I have a Raspberry Pi sitting here, Ubuntu and Windows. It's not because I'm schizophrenic and like all sorts of different flavors of Linux and OSs, but I like to test things across the board. And it's just creates, a great environment to do things on. But I also have in here Chef Compliance, which shows, hey, my system's not compliant. I wonder, actually, something must have failed this morning because it had been compliant. But this is one of the key aspects to see in real time things that are going on in addition to what's happening in the CLI. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. If you're thinking about just getting started with Chef, you can install Workstation on any laptop or machine, Windows, Mac, or Linux. You can spin them up in the cloud. You can get started with Chef Automate and Infra Server. In my case, I've installed it on a VM in my lab, but you can easily spin one up in the AWS or Azure Marketplace. And I think it's important to note that you can use Automate for free for 60 days. So as you're going through, everything is enabled and you can use that. I'm trying to think what else I have in my environment. Obviously, I have some nodes. If you have an AWS or Azure account, that's great. It's not necessary to get started. Like I said, I have Raspberry Pis that are running different Linux OSs, and you can use those in your environment to do testing. Docker, of course, you can run VirtualBox or other kind of VM.
So John, your nodes, are they all, I'm guessing your Raspberry Pi is an actual physical machine. Are they all physical machines, or some of them VMs? Or
yeah, some are physical, some are VMs. And just another word on my lab itself. So I have my chef.lab domain running on a separate subnet here in my home office. Everything sort of runs nicely and can speak to itself. But I could also connect AWS nodes to this. It's a little tricky because when you have a lab environment and you're trying to communicate to the outside world, and the outside world wants to communicate back in, you have to do some things with your router that can be complicated. And in those cases, I'll spin everything up in AWS and create different nodes in there. And there's a lot of free tier stuff that I use, frankly, for target nodes, for example. I threw in the Raspberry Pi. I have a fleet of Raspberry Pis. This happens to be a Raspberry Pi 4, which is a great test environment because you can install a lot of different flavors of Linux on it. If you want a physical device where you want something, it's pretty straightforward to do all that. So, in addition to a So I have Chef with Automate. I have Workstation, separate machine, and then I have target nodes. I've even used, because I'm in a Linux environment, I use libvirt and spin up VMs and LXCs, Linux, that are running different flavors of Linux as well, and they behave very similarly to sort of mini VMs without taking too many resources, which is nice, and I can push things out anywhere I want. So one of the things,
does that mean you're regularly like destroying some of these machines as well?
Some of them are pets that I'm like, what's on that thing? I don't remember what I put on there. Like the Raspberry Pi has evolved from being some ephemeral to being a pet that I don't want to destroy, mostly because it's a little harder physically to go and reset the thing if I blow it up. But I have templates, and I've even I've created some basic images in AWS, and then I make templates from those AMIs. Like this workstation, I made an AMI template. So if it gets destroyed, I just spin up a new one. If I do something for whatever reason, I spin up a new one. I clone my Chef repo to it, and I'm completely back in business. Really in minutes. I put together a guide also on how to deploy Chef Automate and Chef Infra Server, and I say in 30 minutes, but it actually takes just about 15-20 minutes running on a VM and an underpowered, not official CPU and stuff like that running. And the script that I have to do that, it's funny because that's scripting on top of scripting, right, Dan? Because when you deploy Automate and Infra Server, it actually uses like Habitat components to build out everything. There's I forget how many different services are running, quite a few.
Oh, the list of services just goes on. I think that there used to be, so when we first built Habitat, it was designed with a microservices architecture, and they're all in different repos. But then it turns out if you update one repo, you have to update them all anyway. So it's one big product now, but they're all designed to be able to update separately. That kind of stuff. It's pretty sweet. So when you pull them down and say, I want to use Automate, it's like an authentication service. I have like the artifact service, that kind of stuff. There we go.
So I'm actually sitting on my Automate server.
Nice.
Which is called automate.chef.lab. And these are all the services that are running, and it's healthy and everything is up and running. But once this is up and running, whether it's in the cloud or on-prem, there's a couple important things that you have to do to set up your workstation. In Workstation, you can download the installer. There's also the install.sh script, which you can get from the docs, .chef.io. Just search for install.sh. Handy little script that goes and grabs the latest workstation and installs it for you. And regardless of whether you're using Mac, Linux, or Windows, everything works the same. It also has embedded Ruby when you install Workstation, so you don't have to pre-install Ruby. You really don't have to pre-install anything. You just install Workstation. It uses the embedded Ruby, which works with all the latest and greatest Chef stuff.
Yeah, so bundles all the tools with it. I think if you're not new to the stream, you've definitely heard me rant on about how awesome Automate as a workstation is, because you just get Habitat. In fact, that's a great example. So Infra Client specs, CLI, which is kind of like what you're seeing now. If you ever use the Chef command, you'll be using the Chef CLI,
right?
And then Habitat and TK as well.
Everything is in here. Test Kitchen is in here, and all the key pieces, as Dan said, and since it's using the embedded Ruby, everything works the way it should. And Ruby's been going through some upgrades lately that our infra team and all other teams have been tracking very closely. So these are things that are very important. So in the ecosystem, I have my automate server infra. I got to find a better way to say automate infra, or it's my infra server. It's also running automate on top. But for what we're talking about today, it's the infra server. So it's my warehouse of all my content, and I have Workstation. And when you initially set up your Workstation, and in this case, I'm in a user folder. The username is Chef, and in this main folder, there's a chef direct. I could type today. So the .chef folder in the user home is where your stuff lives that essentially enables Workstation to communicate consistently and universally with your infra server. And there's a couple pieces in here. The most important is the credentials file. Just open it here. I don't know if can you see this okay? Should I zoom this a little more?
I can see it just fine. How about?
Make it large. This is the sort of the very basic credentials file. And this used to have a couple different names, right, Dan? Used to be an RB, like config RB file, something like that. The modern ecosystem uses the credentials file.
Yeah, it was knife.rb. It used to be.
Right.
And you could do some like fun Ruby magic, but it never really had. It wasn't easy to switch between multiple chef servers. This is why config exists now. So I can say I want to use the default server, or I want to use like. So if you're uploading to both Chef Supermarket, which is the public supermarket, and your private one, or you're downloading from the supermarket and then uploading to your private one, this allows you to sort of say I want to use the default source, which might be a public one, and then a private one as well. So it's
right.
Allows you to configure multiple things, or you can also have like multiple internal ones as well. Until this was here like 2 years ago, it was just a jumbling of like let's set some environment variables and do some Ruby magic, but it just works nicely then.
And like I say, this is sort of the bare minimum, and it has a client name, which is when I set up my infra server, I create a user who's basically an admin user, and I create an organization. And in this case, I called it lab. And so my client name is my username, and the client key is this PEM file that's created on the infra server when I create the user. And that essentially enables the secure handshake between my workstation and infra server. I have my actual chef server URL in here, which is organization/lab. And as Dan said, you can have multiple organizations running for different purposes. And a lot of that can be customized. And then the cookbook path, and you notice it's in brackets, which means I can have more than one cookbook path. But in this case, I have my chef repo and the cookbooks. And what that means is Chef knows where your cookbooks are. So when I'm uploading cookbooks or doing other kinds of activity with the cookbooks themselves, I don't have to be in a specific directory on my workstation. I don't have to be in that cookbook directory to upload it, for example. Workstation knows, hey, I'm going to put that, I know where it is, and I'm going to upload it and go from there. This is a very basic version, but you don't have to write it by hand because Chef has a number of commands that allow you to automate and generate a lot of content. So It's knife configure init config, which will actually pose questions to you. And here, you can see it saying enter your chef server URL. It'll ask me what's the user you want. It'll ask me a couple other questions, and then it will output that credentials file for me. If I do it now, it'll ask me do I want to overwrite my existing one, which I don't want to do. But that's a good example of one of the tools that can get you started very quickly. Once that's set, you can check it with a nice, actually a fetch command, which will go from my workstation to InfraServer and grab those keys, and then I can do a check, make sure it works. It goes, yes, I can communicate, verify the certificates, and I can do something like nice client list, which again is having my workstation going to the InfraServer and having it return information, so I know in real time what's where. Now you can see in this little list here, it looks familiar if you were paying attention to my Automate screen. Everything is the same. So everything is good to go at this point. Now, when I was first starting working with Chef, I was like, where do I put stuff? Like when I'm actually coding, if you Google it, over the last 10 years, there's been some changes about where you sort of put stuff. And it can seem like a small thing, but I was like, what's the modern way of doing that? And the key is go into your home directory, whether you're on Linux or Mac. Windows works a little bit differently. It puts the chef file in a slightly different place. But working in your home directory means you have permissions to do a lot of things. If you've installed Docker and given yourself permissions to the Docker group, for example, you won't run into problems of access to various things. And even if you use VS Code, like you clone a repo nowadays, when you open something with VS Code from a cloned repo, it goes, hey, do you trust this? It knows that it comes from someplace other than the workstation itself. So doing everything in your home directory is really the way to go. And you go, well, what do I do next? Well, you do a chef generate repo and give the repo name. This is something typical. I've already done that on the system. And when I do that, it creates the chef repo directory. And it does more than just create a folder. It creates everything that you need to start creating your cookbooks. It creates cookbooks directory, data bags. I've done some Git stuff in here that I've added after the fact. It created the Habitat directory as well. And I've later added policy files and profiles to this. But it essentially means that my root is always going to be, tilde chef repo, easy to remember. It's always in my home directory. I know exactly where things are. So if something does come up where you're like, where'd that file? Well, it's under chef repo. It's under my chef repo cookbooks. It's under chef repo policy files, whatever it happens to be. No need to bury it somewhere in user local, put it in your home directory.
But can I bury it?
You can. You can. But, if you're, one of the best practices is that as you create your chef repo, you create a GitHub or a GitLab repo and start pushing your content. You do your Git add and your Git pushes, so that all your code that's being done locally, even if you put it in some place that you've hidden Benny. You always have that. And as you're creating branches to do new features and things like that, you can get ahead without screwing up sort of all your code. And if you do screw something up, you know that, oh, here, my last good one was in my repo. I'm blowing this away. I'm going to reclone it. I'm going to start over. It's very handy, not just in working with Chef, but just in code in general, to do this, because you're thinking about the changes you're making, the code. You also have another place to look at it. Like when I'm pushing stuff up to GitHub, and I now have a GitLab instance in my lab, so I can do some cool integration stuff. It's handy to go, what was that thing I put in? And I can go look at it visually over there if I don't have VS Code or something else open. It can be very handy dandy. So this is what my Chef repo looks like now after several months of work, where I've created cookbooks and things like that. Everything is running well. I've created a Chef repo. I can generate a cookbook, and this is something I do in the cookbooks directory. And here I'm using the VS Code terminal rather than the built-in Linux terminal. You can see all the stuff that I have in here. And if I do generate cookbook, hackathon, I'm going to put this little K and doc in after it. This is, how many characters is that? 7 extra characters that will save you a ton of time, particularly in the hackathon where you want to go through iterations and testing. What that does, it's going to create a custom kitchen file for test kitchen that will immediately be usable by Docker, so you can spin up instances and do things without having to do anything manual around setting up your kitchen file. There's also a version for doing this in AWS, which when I discovered, I was like, yeah, as what Kaya might say, like, sweet, because I don't have to use Docker. I could use VMs, but I can actually use Test Kitchen to push up instances, to build instances in AWS, to converge them, verify them, destroy them, test. I can use it in exactly the same way. So I'm just going to create this little cookbook, and we should see something pop up over here. So here's my new hackathon, and you can see look at all the stuff that was created in it. It created a recipes test folder, the delivery folder, policy files, metadata, all this stuff. It even did some nice things like create a git ignore, because there's some things that you don't want to show up in your git stuff. There's also a chef ignore in there. So right out of the box, this is what you get. If I look in the recipes folder, hopefully you can see this. There's a default RB in here. But just to give you an example of some of the other generator files. Change into that. So now you can see a new recipe has been created. It put in information from my metadata, but it automatically created the RB. You can do this to create files and templates. Most of the tasks, even attributes files, can be generated through some chef tool. And there's great command line help for this as well. You type a chef command -H, even an extended command like knife cookbook -H or knife node -H, and it'll show you things to do. Use this stuff all the time, and it's a great reference point. But the gist is you don't have to create this stuff from scratch. We've been doing this a long time, and Chef understands, like, here are the components you need, and we're going to build it for you, and we'll give you the raw materials, and you just do the fun coding stuff. So I'll show you a little example of sort of all of this put together. This is a little project that I like to deploy called Cowsay. And this is not a new thing. Cowsay is a little app that creates a little cow with udders with a little balloon. And it's often used, as a basic test. You can push fortunes to it and things like that. But what I like to use it for is so when I log into any of my nodes, and I've converted the cow to Tux, which is the little penguin, with the balloon having the IP address of that particular node. So, as you're flying through a lot of different nodes and doing a lot of testing and doing a lot of things like, where am I? Who hasn't run, some RM-R command? That's what they thought was a different node, where you sit there banging away on something. It's just a nice way to sort of stay on top of that. So when I created this Cowsay cookbook and used that k-doc in, it actually created the kitchen.yaml file with the dock-in driver. And yes, it's named after the rock metal band of, is that the 80s, Benny? 90s dock-in? It has the transport and the provisioner. It uses inspect for the verifier, and it puts the platforms in. These are a couple default ones that it does. You can set them. I think the default is actually CentOS 8. 8 didn't work for Cowsay for a number of reasons I won't get into, and then does test integration all by itself. The AWS one, by the way, looks like this, where I use a key from AWS and my region. And when I build these nodes using Test Kitchen, it just goes out to AWS, spins them up, does what I need, and I can destroy them at any time. Really cool, great for testing. Particularly if you're running Docker on your machine, you might think, well, is it really the environment? Now, we have done things with Docker that Chef has taken basic containers of Ubuntu, and you name the platform, and added back in a number of things that make them behave like real systems. So an Ubuntu 2004 Docker container run this way acts almost identically to a VM of the same OS flavor, which is really cool. They run systemd and all that kind of stuff. So it's very cool. But the AWS ones, it's really spinning up AWS nodes. And in here you can see I've put a T2 micro, which is really small, plenty of horsepower for these kinds of things, and works really well. So just to go a little bit deeper into the actual Cowsay.
Can I pause you there before you go into
Sure.
Cowsay? Cowsay mine. So we had a question from QBRD. What version of Chef Workstation are you running?
I'm running the latest.
QBRD. No, we've been using Chef Workstation for I think 2 years now.
It's also not just a rename; it's a completely different thing.
Yes, this is not ChefDK. If you're using ChefDK, stop.
Stop it.
You should see my. You should see my talk on that, because
Yeah. Workstation is actually backwards compatible to things you did with ChefTK. And maybe, Dan, this would be a good opportunity to talk about some of those highlighted differences. Like the whole inspec and profile stuff isn't available over there.
Oh, yeah. So bits of Chef Run are on there, but it's if you pick one of these many tools, these tools here, so Cookstyle, Test Kitchen, Chef CLI, they're all old versions if you're using ChefTK. There are some stuff that we don't have anymore because they're just either bundled in or the chef community no longer use them. So some things like Chef Sugar. So some of the gems that we bundle in with our Ruby versions, we just don't use anymore, which is actually slims down the installation, which is very nice. I think we lopped off a couple of 100 meg when we went from DK to Workstation. The latest Workstation is using Test Kitchen 3. If you're not on Test Kitchen 3, I highly recommend it because we did some policy file fixes in there. That I think the long and the short of it is, if you're using policy files, you want to be on Workstation. That's probably the highlights of it.
Mm-hmm.
You can use newer versions of the Chef client with ChefTK, but you don't get Cookstyle, which is what helps you upgrade your Chef Infra client version. So if you're on, let's say, 14, and you're trying to get to 15, trying to get to 16, and then 17, Cookstyle, you can target versions of Chef with Cookstyle and say, I want to be on 15, give me all the deprecations for between 14 and 15, and it will let you upgrade. If you're on a version of DK that didn't know 15 was around, you don't get that help. So actually being on the latest version and then targeting an old version will still give you all the tools you need to help upgrade it. So like this Workstations and DK really were sort of disconnected from the tools you're running. You can select the ones you wanted to run, and it'll let you sort of give you the best experience going through. But as QBRD does suggest, policy files do rule. They absolutely rule.
It really is. If you don't do it for any other reason, using it for policy files, which brings everything together. You don't need Burks anymore. It's solving dependencies. It's putting your profiles with your actual cookbooks and recipes. Just has a lot of great features. So,
and actually the Chef runs are even faster as a result of policy files because they're. If you've got an interesting selection of dependencies, you don't have to dependency solve at the start of every single Chef run with policy files. Policy file lock files, you do all of your calculations up front, and Chef knows what it's got because it just looks at log file and goes, oh, I need this, and this.
Right.
And that's it. They're in plain text. Whereas Burke files or Chef files, as it used to be known, you sort of select which versions you want to use, and then it goes, oh, well, is that the latest version? I don't know. Maybe I want to update. And then it ums and ahs for a bit and then goes, oh, yeah, you're actually fine. Whereas policy files are just like, yep, got it, done. Not a problem anymore. It's much more better
it's
experience.
Great. And there's an automate component of that I'll show off in a couple seconds. And maybe a little later, Darren can go into
I have not
files.
seen that. Yeah.
So this is my little ChefConfs recipe, and I'm pushing it out on CentOS 7 and Ubuntu 18, I think, was in the kitchen file. So, this is part of the advantage of Ruby, where you can do clauses and programmy things. You can actually write cookbooks in YAML, but there's a limit. Once you start adding logic, it starts to be less advantageous, but certainly for starting, you can use YAML for some of these things.
And then you can once you've finished with YAML, or you go like, I need to go to Ruby. There's a converter as well, so it just takes what you've got and blats it straight into Ruby, which is pretty sweet.
That's totally sweet. These things are resources. I'm doing a Yum package. This is a resource, actually. Package, which is the short form of installing a package. I also have some stuff in here because when I was doing this originally, I realized that ChefConfs was no longer available on CentOS. I was like, what's the world coming to? What the heck? So I actually had to install a repo, the Apple release repo for for Yum on Yum, but not on Ubuntu Debian platforms. And this actual command, this Yum package Apple release, pretty straightforward. It adds everything in. If you were to do that manually, you can do that manually, but adding that repo or finding out about it and doing some of this can be a real pain. This belies the fact that there's a lot going on underneath the covers. Then it just installs the package. And then I'm echoing it out to my system profile so that it appears on login when I shell in. And I also discovered during this process that Debian places Causa not in user bin, but in user gains. I'm like, oh, okay. Why? Okay. And that's the modern way. So, there's a lot of things crossing and happening between these two simple machines. So it made for good testing of logic and all that kind of jazz. You can also, add attributes file, which allow things to show up in Automate and in the CLI. This attributes file goes a long way, and I'll show a couple other examples of bringing the integration between what you're doing on your workstation and VS Code into Automate in a cool and fancy way. So I have this built. I have also created in here a little test, and this could be converted to a true profile and a control, but for demonstration purposes today, I'm just saying, is it installed Causa, and does the content on my profile include the Causa line so that I know that's in there? And you may have noticed in my recipe itself, I have this not if. So if I didn't do this every time this ran, it would add a new line to my profile, which I don't want to do. So I'm just doing a simple grep to go, hey, does that exist? If it exists in there already, don't add it again, and that sort of thing. So those are some of the basic pieces. I'm not going deeply into profiles yet here. I'll let Dan do some of that later. But one of the things that I can do is I can move into this. And a best practice is to run cook style. And I can do a cook style -a on this folder. We're just going to check everything in here. Cook style is awesome, particularly if you're new at Ruby or coding. It knows everything down to, like, have you put in a carriage return after the last line of code in your file? Because that's technically an error and can cause some problems. The -a auto-corrects. So, when I first install VS Code, I always forget to change the tabs from 4 to 2. So I end up with a file with, all the tabs are wrong. And of course I go in and fix it. But I fix VS Code. But to fix my code, I just run this, and it removes all the extra spaces, does everything like that. More importantly, it checks the syntax. And as Dan was talking about earlier, if you have different versions that you're working on, cook style can be used across older content and newer content. The auto correcting, I just ran it the other day on something, and there were 2,000 different files because I was using one of the remediation cookbooks that we have that fix something with CIS, a CIS profile. And cook style ran through, and it was an older remediation cookbook, and it fixed everything. I think there were 11 things out of the 2,100 that it couldn't autocorrect. And then it goes, oh, you can run Rubocop on that, and it'll fix those. or you can do a couple other things to ignore sort of uncorrectable things that you know about, stuff like that. So I always love that. So the Cause, now exists, and I'm in this folder. I upload it to my. Actually, I'm going to move out of this direction so you can see the magic of my credentials file. I'm in my home directory, but it's going to know, hey, I know where to find the cookbook.
Nice.
Because you put it in my credentials file. And I uploaded it. Cookbook's uploaded. If I go over to Automate, and I'm looking at the Chef Infra server that I added, I can see, hey, there's Cause right there, and it's 0.11. Cool thing here, everything that I just did in my VS Code is now living in Automate and viewable. Not just viewable by me, viewable by anybody who you have on your team who's engaged in your project and go, hey, did so-and-so add such and such? Yeah, they can clone the repo and they can do all that, do whatever you're doing, but you can look at everything right in Automate. So here's my actual files. There's that. I don't have any files like templates, but if I have, I'll show you an Nginx example in here where I did create files, basically an index file. Oh, I thought I could see that. There it is. This is what I really wanted to look at. And a little index file that I'd created with variables that will show off this system information about the thing. So I actually, in a normal coding scenario, before I upload my cookbook, I would run Test Kitchen. So what I'm going to do that is, so you saw the kitchen.yaml file with the docking. I can just do now within the cookbook, do a kitchen create. It's actually going up and creating these things. And if I do a Docker PS on here, I can see, hey, I have doing pen test system running. Now, if I do a kitchen purge, I'm going to take my code, my test that I have, a bunch of other stuff, deploy it to these containers that are created. And when it's done, do some basic sort of checking. You can do all these steps at once with a kitchen test, which will create, converge, verify, and destroy all in one thing, which can be handy in workflows. Uh-oh.
Oh, that is the demo gods.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a whole lot of red.
Oh, that's a look.
Probably because I deployed this before. It's basically already
It's
installed.
interesting.
Kitchen Verify is showing that all the various pieces should be installed. Why is it dying? No.
You have angered the live demo gods.
It's so true.
Totally.
They're really a thing, you know.
Oh, I know.
Oh yeah, I couldn't get a single dock and converge run the other day, and it may have been my local DNS, but like I couldn't get any package mirror to work. Like it was just doing an update, and you're like, this was working yesterday. What's going on?
Yeah. I want to see, before I rebuild them, I did a kitchen list just to show, what are the systems that I have running. So I can do a kitchen login. there's a shortcut to get into the system. Hey, and that's because I ran this before successfully. Cowsay is installed, and you can see, hey, there's the little tucks, and there's several shapes you can output, including the cow. I happen to like the tuck because it tells me this is the Linux system that I'm running it on. But you notice it says 172.18.0.2, which is good to know. I'm going to do kitchen list and make sure, and then I'm going to do a kitchen login. This kitchen login, similar to like a Docker exec IT, but a lot simpler. The credentials are already, essentially.
So Kitchen's got this thing called Train that knows how to communicate with the underlying provider, which is, in this case, is Docker. So like when you do a Kitchen login, it knows how to get onto that machine, how to communicate with it. Normally, this is like an exec or a run, that kind of stuff. And if you're using the Vagrant driver, I think under the hood it might just be do a Vagrant login, but it knows where all the Vagrant files are because they'll be in specific directories.
Yep.
And it's just like, if someone tells me to like debug Vagrant these days, I'm not sure I could do it, but I use Vagrant on a pretty much daily basis these days because I'm using Kitchen. It wraps all of the interestingness of all the edge casey weirdness of Vagrant on Docker. You just kind of development is much easier with it, which is pretty sweet.
The and QBRD in the chat said, you can do Kitchen login too. You can also, if I only have one instance, instead of having both Ubuntu and CentOS, I can just do Kitchen login, and it goes, oh, I know you only have one. I'm logging you into it.
So the two, I think, is just it's like a regex match. It's a globbing, I think. So 2 would match default CentOS Ubuntu 2004. So that's the 2 it's matching. Or you could just go Kitchen login Ubuntu.
Right.
Or Kitchen login CentOS. So you could pick something out of something unique out of each of the strings, and they would log in there, and that works for all the Kitchen commands. So if you're just doing Kitchen converge, and you want to converge your CentOS machines, and you had CentOS 6, CentOS 7, CentOS 8, and CentOS 8 Stream. I don't know why you'd have all those. Then you can just do Kitchen test CentOS, which is pretty sweet. I use that a lot, so it's pretty cool. I'm going to hide Kaya because she seems to have frozen. Oh, she's not frozen anymore. What's going on? There we go.
You can see from here that I'm definitely in a different machine. It's 172.18.0.3, and the other one was .2. It worked, and I always think of Tim Smith when I'm doing kitchen stuff and any kind of verification. I'm testing my logic, the logic of my cookbook. I'm not testing Chef. He goes, that's his job. He's head of the infra team. Early on you might want to do that. It's hard to resist going, hey, it worked. But here I'm testing the logic between these two things here. Two very different systems when it comes to installing Cowsay, surprisingly. But the logic worked. Everything was correct. At this point, this is when I would normally upload my cookbook because I know it works. I'd also do a git update and commit to make sure my good code is running there, et cetera, et cetera. So those are some of the key things. I wanted to show a couple of examples over here of the policy file magic that Dan was alluding to. So in here I have my nodes. They look all like my other nodes, which they're the same nodes, just listed in a different place. But I also have these policy files that I created and pushed to the infra server, and there's some very straightforward commands for doing this. And in each one of these, like I have this Nginx one, you notice that it has a run list built in. In the old days, might do a Burks install to make sure Ojai was installed along with the Nginx cookbook. Policy file goes, oh, I need Ojai. I'm going to go get it per the version that I know is going to work with this particular thing. Very handy and cool, and just makes life a lot easier.
So I have a question. I don't know if you covered it yet, but one of the things that really tripped me up was like all of the different parts that just like appear magically and folks just use and don't really know. Like it's not immediately obvious. So what is Ojai and how does it work? And
do you want to take that, John, or do you want me to take it?
Great.
You take that, Dan.
Yeah. So Ojai is magic, and it runs off unicorn dust. Oh no, hang on, no.
Not unicorn dust.
We're going to run out of unicorn dust. No, it is a system inspector, really. So it can tell you if your machine. It's a little process that goes around and figures out what's on the system. It's a binary. It's to say, it knows that if you're on EC2, it needs to go and check the metadata service, and it can pull out all the EC2 metadata, that kind of stuff. If you're just running in a Docker machine, it can tell you. So if you're running Docker, I think you might be just run. If you actually do a kitchen login for me, and this should run Ojai, I think you'll get the Ojai output, which will be nasty, probably.
You say?
Just if you just do a kitchen login 2 for me, and then just do. I haven't done this for a really long time, so it might be different. But if you just run Ojai for me, might not be on the path. Oh no, you're in Docker. I bet you won't be there. It's fine. Yeah. I will grab a demo in a second. I can actually go and grab one of my Raspberry Pis because I have too many Pis kicking around the house.
I'm in a Pi here.
Wait, yeah, sure, I should be there. Cool.
Ojai.
it's trying to do something. Look at all of that.
So Ojai will grab all of this information. So if you heard us talk about attributes last week, Kaya talked about attributes and why I don't like them. These are the automatic attributes, which is the ones where I don't get a choice whether they're hate or not, so they're just there. But they're actually awesome. So there's a bunch of system information, like how much RAM you've got, how much CPU you've got, whether you're running on virtualized hardware. You haven't got to figure out what kind of init system you're running. Ojai will tell you and figure it out yourself. So they're really, really nice there. And it just does it all automatically for you and export that node data. Sometimes you can say, I don't want half a node data. You can say, I just want these. So you can tune how much Ojai searches for as well, which can be really nice if you're running on a low power system, or you're really resource constrained. And something like Facebook, if you use 0.1 of a CPU, they can cost you £10,000 a day. So they only export certain amounts of Ojai data. Most of us, the 99.9% of us, don't need to do that. But that's pretty nice.
Very cool. Thank you.
I think these are the package versions, aren't they? So it's pretty good. I'm guessing coming back from
there's a ton
of
content in there. So back over here, these versions, by the way, and I have this Linux policy file, and it'll show you revisions, which is, it's locking. This is what's locked into that policy file, and versions of cookbooks and packages and different things that you're having in there. But this can be very useful, after the fact, if you've been away from it for a while. So in each one of these, so I was just on that Raspberry Pi 4, I can click on the little dots. I can say manage tags, edit run lists, edit attributes. So I can actually delete it from here. But if I, edit the run list, I can see, and depending on how this was created, I can add. I can go, add Nginx to this thing and create it. Now, when I look at that Raspberry Pi 4 and look at the run list, it would add it there. I actually created this Raspberry Pi slightly differently. So Chef correctly goes, you can't add that. to this run list. It's sort of locked in a different way. So it appeared for a second and it disappeared. But there are others that when I bootstrap using policy files and essentially using a JSON lock, I can go through and add and remove different basically recipes from the run list on the fly. I have a, what is this? I forget which one I've been doing different things with it, but you can see in here a lot of different capabilities. But policy files, if you haven't tried them and you're going through the hackathon steps, it's a really quick way to do a lot of development and locking things in a certain way, and bringing together all the pieces at once. It's if you've even used modern, I like to call it modern Chef, and doing several of the steps that I've done in bootstrapping and other stuff like that, the policy files take it to the next level. And not just because it's visible in Automate, but just the way it brings all the pieces together. And if you listen to the session this week, Tim Smith, I think, was talking about this, that we're really working to bring infra, the Chef client and infra server and inspec and profiles and all these things together so that they all live in the same place, you're using similar syntax, and you're deploying these things as you would, and finding things together, grouped, whatever makes sense. And that's one of the great powers of Chef is there's a lot of ways to do this. You can do this different ways, depending how sophisticated you are and how sophisticated your use case is. You can totally get by without using policy files, particularly if you're just starting out. It can add a complexity that can be a little difficult to understand without some of the other Chef context. And you can easily get up to speed and then add it on later, and you can be totally successful with automation using Chef without policy files. But once you get to a certain level, and then you learn policy files, you're like, oh, hallelujah. There's a great way to do several of these pieces, several of these things, faster, better, stronger. $6 Million Man reference. But the tests that are done, this is what compliance is about. And you can see, my system's not in compliance. I wonder why.
What have you done, John?
Oh, my Raspberry Pi 4 failed.
Oh, no.
All right, see, mine, I've got some kernel modules that I uninstall, and it just doesn't. The video kernel modules just don't uninstall. I still haven't figured out why. And I can't tell until I get Automate installed locally, which is what I'm going to do on a stream at some point. So you get reporting. So the really nice thing about Automate and kind of Chef Server is if you do Chef run like I do, or you just run Chef locally, it can report back to Automate, so you can then debug the runs later on. And you've got like run history. So if you have any failed runs, you haven't got to log into the machine and figure it out manually, which is. No one likes logging into machines, unless you're playing around with it.
Huh, it's weird.
So it looks like we've got 28 people joining our hackathon already, which is pretty sweet.
Oh, sweet. Where are you seeing this? On DevPost?
On DevPost, yeah. This is pretty cool. So I actually just went up by one when I had to refresh the page a second ago. Oh, yeah. It's pretty cool.
Awesome.
So if any of those 28 people are watching and you've got any questions, just fire away. And if you're not watching the stream now and you're watching at a later date and we're not live, then come on the community Slack and just fire away at the questions.
Absolutely.
What channel is it again? It's in an
Hackathon channel.
Yeah.
It's got its own specific special channel. And also, if you think about any questions between now and Tuesday that you would like to like talk about, if you want to ask me anything, live stream office hour session on Tuesday. So if you don't want to put it in community Slack, or if you put it in community Slack and you don't get an answer, which I don't see that happening, but we'll see.
Or we might just save it for a stream if we're feeling greedy.
Sure, we could do that.
Yeah. Well, and the stream. Actually, are we changing our stream times, or are we still doing it? We're still doing it 2:30, aren't we? 2:30 BST. So that's
9:30.
9:30 Eastern.
The only one that we may need to move is the one with mentors.
Cool.
Because that one we have to work on other people's timelines as well. So
yeah.
By the way, I'm showing ServiceNow. You might be like, why are you showing ServiceNow? Because I've integrated it with Automate, and what you're seeing on this are failed client runs, and it's one of the hooks that you can build in and data feeds that you can build in through Automate when you're talking about larger workflows, CI/CD workflows in particular, and reporting and notifications. You can push events that happen that Automate is aware of, and it's aware of anything that's happening on your systems, as you saw, and send alerts and information to ServiceNow, which then you can act on to do other things. I also followed the instructions of Stephanie, who gave a presentation yesterday, or I think.
Tap here.
And created the GitLab deployment that she put together, which is awesome. And GitLab has basically a little YAML file where you put your controls into your stages and jobs, and deploys it. And it helped me get from, I've always wanted to try one of these workflows, right within my chef stuff. And I did, and I had it. It goes in and it gets the repo, the folders. It runs Test Kitchen was part of the process, and when Test Kitchen succeeds, it uploads it to my infra server, and there's other steps that Stephanie outlined in there, and I was like, oh, that's really awesome, because those workflows, the things that you do over and over again, or you're testing, like, wow, now all I have to do is make a change, and do a git push, and it automatically kicks off the workflow in the GitLab thing, which I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Of course, when I was doing it early on, I got 100 fails because I didn't know what I was doing. Cool. But
failing is the first step to succeeding.
That's right. If you're not failing, you're not learning. That's
exactly.
That's the basis of that. But the integrations that you can make are really cool, really handy, and very practical. Because at Chef, we're always thinking like DevOps folks do, and everybody around them is thinking, like, what are the tools? What do they need? I wish I had. And that stuff makes its way into our products. The ServiceNow integration, we did something with Krista. If you didn't happen to see the presentation that we did with Chris yesterday, I think, Krista creates a tool that you can basically orchestrate actions based on, in their example, using Chef Automate, Infra Server, sending alerts to ServiceNow, it reacting to those alerts to take some action. And their big thing is they show it on the phone, right? So it can actually go, hey, this server is down. Do you want me to remediate it with one of the following? And you just touch anything, right? And behind the scenes, it's using Krista's technology, but also Chef, and it's using Workstation behind the scenes, and it's using Chef Infra and Automate APIs to make those calls. And the cool thing about Krista too is they actually have some machine learning going on in the background, and it learns and goes, hey, you've had this print spooler problem on these Windows servers, and you fixed it this way the last 50 times. Do you want me to automate? Want me to automatically fix this in the future? And and you can script those things into it, which is awesome. Like after working with Chris at Krista, and Krista's sort of like Siri or Alexa, something like that. But after working with them, I'm like, I want that. That's awesome.
That's so cool.
They integrate nicely with just a million things. It's like, this API monster brought together in a very simple interface that you can pre-code and do some pretty cool stuff. And for our purposes, we created some examples and went through the phases of remediation essentially. But it's not always about remediation. It's about workflows. We rarely work by ourselves. So there's, who else am I telling about this? Who else should I tell about this? Who has authority to approve this pull request? All these kinds of things that you're moving through. The integrations are, if they're not currently in Chef, they're things we're thinking about all the time.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you keep mentioning the sort of the like Git and pushing that kind of stuff, and I'm just trying to find a pull request that I can auto release in the background as an example of like things you can do with Chef that we could do as an automating for good. But I can't find a pull request that I can merge right now because I think I did them all this morning.
Oh man.
Yeah, so I'm like, there must be one around it somewhere. Come on.
So you're trying to automate that process? That's like the Get Actions piece, right?
Yeah. So sous chefs have got like 170 ish cookbooks at the minute. They've automated the release process to automatically upload to Supermarket based on a tag name when you merge into the mainline branch, which is cool. And I'm just trying to find out where it is now. But in the background, that all uses Knife for uploaded to Supermarket, obviously Supermarket. There's GitHub Actions with Inspect. There's a whole host of our Chef tooling that we use, or they use in the background. So that might give you some inspiration. I'm just trying to find the right PR.
Yes, absolutely.
Quietly, you can see my screen flashing in and out. It's because I'm frantically trying to find a pull request that I can merge.
Here you can see my CI/CD pipeline, and it did a clone, and it runs Cookstyle, and it runs Test Kitchen, and it uploads. The way I have this set up is if there's any change, it will automatically. Let me see. So now if I go into this pipeline, you can see it. Come on. It's running. It cloned, it ran Cookstyle, it succeeded. It's running Test Kitchen, and because I have Docker running on my GitLab runner, just runs it. And if I were to log into the runner and do a Docker PS, I'd see hey, there's the containers. It's doing its thing. But this kind of workflow, particularly in shared environments, are incredibly useful because you can, break out the steps, which is a good exercise in and of itself, because you're sort of, what are the steps that I have to take, but codifying them into successful deployment strategies. This is very basic. This is basically a way to simplify testing of cookbooks, right? Which is sort of, the testing of the testing. But following along Stephanie's outline, and she has a great companion document too that, if we haven't released yet, is soon going to be posted on Chef.io, so you can try this out.
Actually, is that Stephanie who gave the workflow testing, how to automate your cookbook release process?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm trying to get her on the stream at some point. So it looks like she might be interested. So actually, Jason and I, who gave the sous chef talks, gave a very similar talk, weirdly enough, about automating our release pipeline. We came at it at a very different angle. We're probably both using the same tools underneath. So like, we're both using Test Kitchen to test our containers. In fact, I'm gonna steal the screen share a second, and I'll show that. Let me just. So this is DNS mask, and let me just make the window less crazy. So we've got our DNS mask cookbook, and I'm sure Stephanie will do the same thing underneath the hood. We're using Test Kitchen and the Docker driver to test on GitHub Actions. And the first thing we do, go for checks, is we do delivery, which, if it actually ran, would be nice. Oh, it's running. It's fine. I spoke too soon. This runs chef exec delivery local all. Under the hood, it's just going to run cook style probably. And then I'll come back to here and then we just run some YAML lint, which is a pretty standard YAML linting thing, which makes sure that YAML's in the correct order, and then the markdown lint, which is the same thing. Markdown, then markdown links. Ooh, delivery failed. Well, this is helpful because we can see that.
5 demo guides.
Oh no, this is fine. I get to fix this and prove that actually. Hopefully I can fix this. I'll fix it. Where is this? We've got a training space of metadata. What? Oh, this is me. This is actually me fixing something a second ago. So that was Cookstyle running, and Cookstyle is just RubyCop under the hood. If I get it, files changed, and then the metadata. Yeah, it's a host file. That's fine. That actually wasn't me once. Brilliant. So hopefully, if I do that, that's interesting. I can't. Just when I get rid of the enter, there's a blank space. I can't get rid of it today. That's a bit of a shame. Oh, come on.
No.
So if that ran, and this is a perfect example of why it shouldn't run, is delivery doesn't. If delivery doesn't pass, so that will be doing things like unit tests, passing. In fact, I can just go to the delivery file and show you when it runs, rather than just talking about it. So with delivery, delivery project Hubble, this will run rspec against our spec folder, Cookstyle, which will then display all the details so we can figure out what's going on, and then that's it. We used to run things like Food Critic. If you came from the Chef DK days, we would have run Food Critic. We don't have Food Critic anymore because Cookstyle is so damn awesome. I will American swear. This isn't the swearing in England, so it's fine. It doesn't count. Food Critic was good, but what it couldn't do was autocorrect. Cookstyle does all of the things Food Critic used to do, but except for warning and complaining at you, it can also correct for you on the command line as well. So it does all the niceness that RubyCop does, we do in the chef world, which is very, very cool. So really, it's just rspec and Cookstyle there under the hood. And what else have I got? I'm just going to workflows. So the CI YAMLs, the one I'm going to talk about in a second, but the Markdown links configuration and this is like make sure that if you're writing Markdown and you're linking to other documents, that those links are actually correct. So she tries to follow those, and if they don't go anywhere, then it's just like, no, you've given me a false link, or it checks
Nice.
that they're not malicious links that people are putting in, which is nice. So we've got some really nice stuff there. So we do the usual delivery, which is that's our Chef Exec delivery all. And if you haven't come across Actions Hub or GitHub Actions, then why not? Because they're a great little. Actually, I say this thing, they're a little great. They're basically sous chefs, but from GitHub Actions, and they've got some chef delivery stuff up there that we use. That runs Chef Exec delivery local all with a bunch of checkouts and that kind of stuff for us. Then YAML lint is the same story, and then if I get to the meat and bones of it, there's integration here. So we could say we need Markdown lint, YAML lint, and delivery, and when that all works, we'll go and do a test matrix. You might notice this from Travis days, but this under the hood just runs test kitchen test, and then each of those suite names back to back, and it'll do. Scroll all the way to the top here and into the PR again. So if this had actually run delivery, if delivery had passed, then integration would run, and you'd have a sort of matrix of jobs here. I wonder if I could see the previous one. Ah, some passed. No, it didn't. Look for this one. So you can see delivery, YAML, and Markdown lint, and then these run, which is pretty cool. And then you can see all these run. And then when that passes, there is actually a little bit of magic. Not powered by unicorns once, but powered by a Kubernetes cluster that does version bumps and make sure that change logs are all there. So you'll often see things like a commit with there we go, set change log to unreleased. So it resets the change log to the next person to come along can add things under the unreleased section. If you've got a better way of doing that and you can tell us how we're doing it wrong, we're always open to better ideas. And maybe someone in the hackathon could be like, hey, you're doing a change log releaser, and we've got a better way of doing it. I can do this with Habitat, or I can do it with. I could test that we're changing the change log correctly. So if I get actually, I can explain this a bit more.
Actually, I was just going to point out we are 7 minutes from the end of our time.
I think I'm going to do this example and then shut the egg up. I think. Yeah. So get the change log, which releases up you want to communicate what you're changing every time, and we really like to release every single time. But what we like to do is have an unreleased header. So when the next person comes along and says, hey, I've got these unreleased changes, you just bundle it underneath there, and then the system figures out if it's a major, a minor, or a patch release. So it'll do all the release date and that kind of stuff. Maybe you've got a better way of doing that, because that's a super, super common problem in the DevOps world, is figuring out version bumps and doing that, and then how do I upload to Kitchen to Supermarket properly, or do you have a nice way of uploading to Supermarket using Knife? Do you use Docker? Do you use a Habitat built Knife? Do you pick one of our tools, because there's some really nice, interesting use cases there, and that's really, really simple and quite small use cases. They're just really targeted. So you could run that on a Kubernetes cluster if you're mad like we do, or you could run it on a Lambda, which is the other thing we were thinking about in the past. We were gonna run a AWS Lambda, run Knife in the Lambda. That's also possible because Lambdas now support Ruby, which is pretty sweet. And you can also bundle, because Lambdas now support binaries, you can bundle in Lambda binary, the Knife binary or the Habitat binary for testing, which is pretty cool. So I'd love to see if you've the crazier the idea, the better, because this is kind of crazy in places, but I'm pretty sure this audience has got some even crazy ideas.
Yeah. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, real quick, there is like I know we're short on time, but there is something that I did not mention that I think is really important to mention. As far as the rules go, you can either submit something that is net new, i.e., you started it today, or you can submit an existing project. The only stipulation for submitting an existing project is that it must have a chef component added after today or starting today. So yeah, don't. It's not limited to just stuff that you are that you can do within the 6 weeks. It's definitely um, a little bit more broad from that perspective. Just make sure that at least one chef component is added from today forward. So I hope that answered some questions for you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure
a
there's
good thing
some
to call out.
projects already out there that are sort of
Yeah.
using Chef in some sort of way. I get to know like a really interesting CI/CD pipeline, but maybe you don't build your containers with Habitat or something like that. Like, how do you get that into the release pipeline? Because as I said like probably almost 2 hours ago now,
Right.
Habitat like properly bundles like small containers out there. So if you want a rapid little Docker container, Habitat's the way forward. Yeah, that's my favorite use for it. But I live in Dockerland, so
Yeah. Cool. I think those are some great ideas, and thank you thank you both for that education session.
I learned a ton.
I sure did too, and I'm sure like our viewers learned as well.
There are a couple of blog posts if you go to the chef.io/blog, including getting started with chef infrastructure management in 30 minutes.
I think we actually linked to that from the resources page on the hackathon.
There's 2 videos in there. I have some longer form guides also that outline a lot of what I talked about. And the test kitchen, I think I went into the AWS component because I remember hitting upon that and being like, wow, that's awesome. Good way to spend money too within your AWS account. But actually, there's some decent resources out there. I know Dan and Kaya have had a lot of chats, as I mentioned earlier, too, that have nuggets of chef deliciousness in them.
Yeah, I think one of our previous streams we talked about Test Kitchen and Terraform.
Sure did.
So if you've got Terraform and you've not got a proper CI/CD platform, a CI/CD for Terraform stuff, then there you go. Have some of that.
Yeah.
There's probably some stuff there actually. Yeah. Or there might be one of the talks maybe.
There's tons of ideas. I'm sure. But we should wrap up.
All right. Well, definitely thank you for joining, and thank you for staying tuned this long. Yeah. We are available, as we talked about, available to answer any immediate questions that you may have on community Slack, and also stay tuned tune in for our Ask Me Anything office hour session on Tuesday.
Perfect. 14th. Love it.
Cool.
All right.
Cool. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks everybody.
Yeah, you guys are awesome.
Thanks you guys for doing this.
Happy.
Happy to
it's nice that someone else joined us in the stream because we're like me and Kaya like hardcoring it out all the time.
Yeah. Right? Hardcore.
Yeah, we love some guests on the stream. Although I feel like you aren't guests.
No.
You're not really.
I mean, we're technically not on the stream often. Ever.
That's true.
Oh, that's true. So yeah, I guess. Thank y'all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Until next time.
Until next time. Bye.
Bye.